Okay, here's a question for you. If you had to choose between having tons of money, being really good looking, or being exceptionally intelligent, which one would you pick? And why?
It's a classic dilemma, isn't it? And, intelligence often feels like the smartest choice.
Right. We tend to think it's something you're just born with, maybe.
Yeah.
Or that it automatically means good grades, or that smart people are always charming.
Yeah, those are definitely common ideas. But the actual story of intelligence, it's much more complex, more dynamic, and honestly way more interesting than those assumptions suggest.
Absolutely. So welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really going deep into the world of intelligence. Our goal is to give you a much clearer, more informed view of this, fundamental human thing.
We'll look at what it actually means, how psychologists have tried to define it over the years.
And measure it.
Yeah.
Which involves some pretty quirky methods early on.
Oh, definitely. We'll explore the tests themselves, how they're used in the real world, and then dive into some really exciting new areas. Social intelligence, emotional intelligence, and of course, AI.
Perfect. Let's get started.
Okay, so at its most basic level, our sources define intelligence as essentially the ability to understand the world around you, to think rationally, and crucially, to use the resources you have effectively when you're facing challenges.
Right, so it's not just about knowing stuff.
Exactly. It's about applying knowledge, adapting. That definition itself was a pretty big step forward.
Okay, that makes sense as a foundation. But you mentioned psychologists wrestled with this. It wasn't just one simple idea.
Not at all. That's where it gets really interesting. For a long time, you had thinkers like Alfred Binet, Louis Terman, David Wechsler. They kind of saw intelligence as one single general ability.
Like one core smartness?
Pretty much. They thought, okay, maybe it shows up differently, solving a puzzle versus, say, writing something creative. But the underlying mental engine, that core ability, was basically the same thing, a unitary notion.
But not everyone agreed.
No, definitely not. A strong counterargument started bubbling up. What if it wasn't one big engine, but more like a set of different tools?
Oh, okay. Multiple abilities.
Exactly. E.L. Thorndike, for example, suggested 3 distinct types: abstract intelligence, social intelligence, and concrete intelligence, like different ways of being smart.
Social intelligence.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that later, I bet.
We will. Then Louis Thurstone took it even further. He argued for 7 separate primary mental abilities, things like verbal comprehension, word fluency, number skills, spatial visualization.
Wow, 7.
7. And he didn't just theorize, he actually created tests to try and measure each one independently. His idea was radical.
Hey.
Someone could be brilliant with words, but maybe not so great with spatial stuff, or vice versa.
So it's less like one score and more like a profile of strengths.
Precisely. And this shift, from a single G factor, as Spearman called it.
Spearman.
Yeah.
Tell me about him.
Right. Charles Spearman, back in 1927. He used statistics and identified a general factor, or G, which he saw as this sort of core intelligence needed for everyday competence. But he also identified specific factors, or E's, which were abilities for particular tasks.
So a bit of both worlds, general and specific.
Kind of, yeah. And building on that, Raymond Cattell and John Horn made a really useful distinction later on: fluid versus crystallized intelligence.
Okay, fluid and crystallized, what's the difference?
Think of fluid intelligence as your raw processing power, your ability to tackle new problems, spot patterns, think quickly on your feet. It's more tied to neurological development, less dependent on what you've learned before.
Like the hardware.
Exactly like the hardware.
Yeah.
And crystallized intelligence, that's all the software and data you've accumulated. It's your knowledge gained through education, through experience. It's your vocabulary, your general knowledge.
So one is about potential, the other about accumulated knowledge.
In a way, yes. Your fluid intelligence might peak a bit earlier in life, while your crystallized intelligence can keep growing for much longer.
That makes a lot of sense. And then there's Howard Gardner. He really blew the doors open, didn't he?
He absolutely did. Gardner argued for 9, count 'em, 9 truly independent types of intelligence.
9. What were they?
Well, you have the more traditional ones, like linguistic and logical mathematical, but then he added spatial, musical, bodily kinesthetic, like athletes or dancers, interpersonal, which is understanding others.
Like Thorndike's social intelligence.
Very similar, yes. Then intrapersonal, understanding yourself. And even naturalistic, understanding the natural world. And existential intelligence, thinking about the big questions.
Wow, that really stretches the definition of smart.
Totally. It highlights how intelligence shows up in so many different ways, influenced by both our genes and our environment.
Okay, so if intelligence is this, well, complicated, multifaceted thing,
Yeah.
how on earth did we even start trying to measure it? Especially back in the day. Must have been tricky.
Oh, it was more than tricky. The very first attempts back in the mid-1880s were, let's just say, creative. You had people like Paul Broca and Sir Francis Galton.
Galton, I've heard of him. What did he do?
Well, Galton had this idea that intelligence might be linked to physical characteristics. He actually measured things like head size.
Head size. Seriously.
Seriously, bigger head, bigger brain, smarter person. That was the basic thought. He also tested things like reaction time, how sharp people's senses were, vision, hearing.
And did any of that work? Measuring heads?
No, not really. Turns out head size isn't a great predictor of intelligence. Fun idea, but not very useful scientifically.
Okay, so glad we moved on from the tape measures. What came next?
Well, a key figure was Raymond Cattell, different Cattell from the fluid crystallized guy. This Cattell worked with Galton and then set up labs in the U.S. in the early 1890s.
Okay.
He's important because he was the first to use the term mental test. And crucially, he really pushed for standardized administration.
Standardized?
Meaning everyone takes the test under the same conditions. Same instructions, same timing, everything. That way, you can actually compare results fairly between people or for the same person over time. It was a huge step towards making it more scientific.
Right. Consistency is key. So how did we get from these early mental tests to the kind of IQ tests we think of today?
The real breakthrough came in France around 1905. A psychologist named Alfred Binet, often called the father of intelligence testing, was asked by the Paris school authorities to figure something out.
What was the problem?
They needed to identify students who were struggling in school, but not for obvious medical or, home life reasons. They needed a way to understand why some kids just weren't keeping up academically.
A practical problem needed solving.
Exactly. So Binet, working with Theodore Simon, developed the Binet-Simon intelligence scale. It wasn't about head size. It was about tasks like logical reasoning, finding rhyming words, naming objects, things more related to schoolwork.
And this led to the idea of mental age.
Precisely. Binet introduced this concept of mental age. It's basically the typical age level at which someone performs on the test.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Let's say Isha is 10 years old chronologically. If she passes all the test items designed for 12-year-olds, her mental age is 12. If another 10-year-old, Ankit, performs right at the 10-year-old level, his mental age is 10. And if Rajesh, also 10, performs at an 8-year-old level, his mental age is 8.
Got it. So it compares your performance to your age group.
Right. Then building on that, a German psychologist, William Stern, came up with the idea of the intelligence quotient, or IQ, in 1912. Initially, it was just a ratio, mental age divided by chronological age.
Boy.
But it was Louis Terman over at Stanford University who refined it in 1916 when he adapted the Binet-Simon scale.
How did he refine it?
Terman kept the ratio, but multiplied it by 100 to get rid of the decimals. So the famous formula, IQ equals mental age divided by chronological age times 100.
So that's where the number comes from, using our examples.
Right. Aisha, MA12, CA10, would have an IQ of 12, 10, 100, and 120. That's above average. Ankit, MA10, CA10, gets 10, 100, which is average. And Rajesh, MA8, CA10, gets 8, 10, 100, which is 80, which is below average.
Okay, that clarifies the IQ score. And Terman's version became the Stanford Binet test.
Exactly. The Stanford Binet. It's been revised many times since, but that was the foundation. And then, well, the World Wars happened.
How did they impact intelligence testing?
Massively. During World War I, the U.S. Army needed a way to quickly assess and classify millions of recruits. Robert Yerkes led a team that developed the Army Alpha test for literate recruits and the Army Beta test for illiterate ones or non-English speakers.
Wow, testing on that scale must have really pushed the field forward.
It absolutely cemented the importance and utility of large-scale testing. Similar tests, like the Army General Classification test, were used in World War II.
And after the wars.
David Wechsler entered the picture. In 1939, he developed the Wechsler-Bellevue intelligence scale. He felt the Stanford Binet was too focused on kids and verbal skills.
So he made tests for adults.
Yes. His scales were designed specifically for adults and older adolescents. They were later revised into the WAIS, the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, and the WISC for children. These Wechsler scales are probably the most widely used individual intelligence tests in the world today.
It's quite a history, from head measurements to these sophisticated scales. So It's definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation with these tests, right?
Yeah.
Given all those different theories in the history, what kinds of tests are actually used now?
You're absolutely right. There's quite a variety. We can categorize them mainly by how they're given and what kind of material they use.
Okay, like how they're administered?
Yeah. So first, you have individual tests. Like the name suggests, these are given one-on-one. Think Binet's scale, the Wechsler scales we just mentioned, or maybe something like Koh's block design test.
What are the pros and cons there?
Well, the big advantage is rapport. The examiner can really connect with the person, observe how they approach problems, notice their mood, maybe get extra insights. They're often better for spotting creative thinking, too.
But the downside?
They take a lot of time, they can be expensive because you need a highly trained examiner, and obviously you can only test one person at a time.
Makes sense. So the opposite would be?
Group tests. These are designed for efficiency. You can test many people simultaneously. The Army Alpha and Beta tests were early examples. Raven's standard progressive matrices is another well-known one.
Advantages are speed and cost, I assume.
Exactly. Much less time-consuming, more economical. The examiner's role is pretty minimal, but you lose that personal connection, less chance for rapport, less insight into how someone thinks, and they're generally not as good at measuring creativity.
Okay, so individual versus group. What about the type of test material?
Right. Here we distinguish between verbal tests and non-verbal tests.
Verbal sounds straightforward, using language.
Yep. Words, numbers. The subject usually responds verbally. Army Alpha, parts of the ways, those are good examples. They're useful for tapping into higher level thinking and distinguishing between average and, say, above average intelligence.
But the limitations?
Big ones. You can't really use them effectively with people who speak a different language or who are illiterate or very young children. They tend to be quite culture-bound because they rely heavily on specific language and learned knowledge.
So nonverbal tests are the answer to that.
Largely, yes. Nonverbal tests use pictures, designs, physical objects like the Koh's blocks I mentioned or Raven's matrices. The person doesn't need to give a verbal response. They might point, manipulate objects, or draw.
And the big advantage there is?
Much wider applicability. You can give them to people from different language backgrounds, kids, illiterate individuals, even some people with disabilities. They're considered much more culture-free or culture-fair.
Are there downsides to nonverbal tests?
Sometimes. They might not capture the really subtle, higher-level abstract reasoning as well as verbal tests can. And maybe they're slightly less effective at making fine distinctions at the very top end of the intelligence scale. So it really depends on who you're testing and what you want to find out.
Okay, so we have all these different ways to understand and measure intelligence. What does this actually mean for people in their everyday lives? Where do we see these tests making a real impact?
Oh, the applications are really broad and quite significant. Think about effective schooling, for starters.
Helping kids who are struggling.
Exactly. Tests can help identify students who are falling behind educationally, figure out why, and then design specific teaching programs tailored to their needs. It can make a huge difference.
Okay, what else?
Mental health aiding is another big one. Clinicians use intelligence tests alongside other assessments for diagnosis. Understanding cognitive strengths and weaknesses helps in planning therapy or rehabilitation programs. It informs the prognosis, too.
I could see that.
Then there's effective parenting. Understanding a child's intellectual profile helps parents set realistic expectations, provide the right kind of support, and just generally foster their development better.
Reducing frustration for everyone, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. And related to that is career counseling. Guiding students towards educational paths or courses that actually match their intellectual abilities increases their chances of success and, frankly, happiness.
And for adults already working?
Vocational counseling. Helping people find jobs or careers that are a good fit for their cognitive skills often leads to greater job satisfaction, better performance, and less absenteeism. It benefits both the employee and the employer.
So really practical applications across the board. Now, you mentioned earlier that our understanding is still evolving. What are these new trends, these other forms of intelligence people are talking about now?
Right. This is where things get really interesting beyond the traditional IQ. Let's start with social intelligence.
We touched on that with Thorndike and Gardner. How's it defined now?
Karl Albrecht put it nicely. The ability to get along well with others and to get them to cooperate with oneself. It's really about navigating the social world effectively.
Getting along with people and getting things done with them.
Exactly. Albrecht talks about a spectrum. On one end, you have toxic behaviors devaluing people, being uncooperative, which signals low social intelligence. On the other end, nourishing behaviors respect cooperation, good communication, which signal high social intelligence.
What does high social intelligence look like in practice?
Well, people high in it are good at reading social cues, understanding others' perspectives and emotions, both verbal and nonverbal. They tend to be good listeners and speakers. They grasp social dynamics. They're flexible, often good at resolving conflicts or negotiating. Think about someone like, say, Chedon, who might not be the top student, but everyone likes him. He works well in teams. He smooths over disagreements. That's high social intelligence. Compare him to Sauger, who's brilliant technically, but often clashes with colleagues.
Right, I know people like both. Okay, what's next? Emotional intelligence.
Yes, emotional intelligence, or EI. The term was really popularized by Daniel Goleman, though John Mayer and Peter Salovey did the initial academic work.
And the definition.
It's the ability to perceive and monitor one's own and others' emotions, to discriminate among them, and to use this information to guide one's thinking and action. Basically, being smart about feelings, yours and other people's.
How did that break down?
Mayer and Salovey identified 4 key abilities. First, perceiving emotions accurately. Second, using emotions to help you think better. Third, understanding emotions, emotional language, and how emotions evolve. And fourth, managing emotions effectively in yourself and others.
What are the characteristics of someone high in EI?
They tend to be more emotionally stable, patient, optimistic, independent, generally happier, calmer under pressure. Think of Mega, who faces a setback, acknowledges her frustration, but then thinks clearly about solutions and supports her team.
And low EI.
Might look like someone who's more emotionally volatile, impatient, maybe pessimistic, easily overwhelmed by stress, perhaps struggles in relationships. Like Shailesh, who gets easily angered by minor issues and lets it affect his whole day and interactions. High EI is really linked to well-being and success in life and work.
Fascinating. And the last big trend has to be AI.
Absolutely. Artificial intelligence. This is all about creating machines or software that can think and learn from experience, mimicking human cognitive processes. It's a blend of computer science, algorithms, language processing, even philosophy and psychology.
We see it everywhere now, don't we?
Totally. Speech recognition on your phone, spam filters in your email, recommendation engines, medical diagnosis tools, fraud detection, weather forecasting, and of course things like self-driving cars, sophisticated robots, chatbots. That's all AI in action.
But how does it compare to human intelligence? Is it the same thing?
That's a crucial distinction. AI is incredibly powerful at processing information, spotting patterns in huge data sets, and making decisions based on the data and algorithms it's given, but it operates entirely on that stored information.
What's missing?
The human elements. True imagination, genuine emotions, ethical reasoning, understanding social values, consciousness, self-awareness. AI doesn't have those things. It can simulate empathy, perhaps, but it doesn't feel it. It can follow rules, but it doesn't grapple with moral dilemmas in the same way we do.
So it's a powerful tool, but not a replacement.
Exactly. Human intelligence, with all its nuances, its creativity, its emotional depth, its ethical grounding, remains fundamentally different and, in many ways, superior. AI is an amazing product of human intelligence, not really an alternative to it. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. We have covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
Trying to define intelligence to those early head-measuring days.
Right up to emotional intelligence and the complexities of AI.
It's really clear that intelligence isn't just one simple thing. It's this incredibly broad, dynamic range of abilities for understanding, learning, and adapting.
It really is. It reflects our capacity not just to know, but to interact with the world, with each other, and even to build tools that extend our own capabilities.
Which brings us to a final thought for you, our listeners, to maybe chew on. As artificial intelligence becomes more and more capable, more integrated into our lives, but knowing it lacks these core human elements like emotions, ethics, true understanding. What responsibility do we, as humans, with our unique blend of intelligences, have in guiding AI's development and use? And maybe even, how will the rise of AI change how we define our own intelligence in the future?
That's a deep question. How does our definition evolve when we have this powerful, non-human intelligence alongside us? Something definitely worth thinking about.